I just finished washing up all my veggies for making a couple Korean kimchis and a Vietnamese pickled daikon and carrots recipe. I'm using these two books as my guides: Asian Pickles, which I found at the library, and Mak Kimchi's second major cookbook. I have both books and use them often, and I've been following her YouTube channel for years. I'm going to start with Mak Kimchi's recipe on page 120 for Mak Kimchi. The napa cabbage needs to soak in salt for a couple hours, so let's start there. This one is about 2.5 pounds. Mak Kimchi's recipe calls for 3 pounds, but this will be just fine, and you could even go up to about 4 pounds if you wanted to without changing anything else in the recipe. You'll want to make sure that you have a nice big bowl standing by. I'm going to quarter it and rough chop it into bite-sized pieces. And remove the core when you get down to it. This looks like a lot right now, but it will wilt down quite a bit as it brines. Now I'm adding some salt, 6 tablespoons. And 1 cup of water to get things moving. Toss this all around and then let it sit for 2 hours, giving it a toss every 30 minutes. While the cabbage is brining, I'll go ahead and prep the rest of the ingredients. I need 6 of these scallions. I'm just pulling off wilted ends and trimming away the roots, then cutting them into 1/2-inch pieces. I'll need about 6 ounces of this Korean radish. Regular Japanese daikon would also work here too, but I got the big Korean radish that I'm going to use in all 3 recipes. I'm peeling off the skin for most of it and cutting a chunk off to go weigh on my kitchen scale. This was just a little bit over, but it'll be fine once I chop away the root end. I want these julienned into matchsticks. I'm doing this small amount with a knife, but I'll show off a couple of other fun kitchen gadgets later in the video. And these go into the same bowl as the scallions. Mak Kimchi calls for 9 cloves of garlic, and these were all different sizes, so I have about 10 here. Trim away the root ends and give them a light chop. They'll be going into a food processor, so there's no need for fine mincing at this point. A small onion, this one weighed in at 5 ounces. Also going into the food processor, so I'm just cutting it into manageable pieces. And finally, just a small bit of ginger. I know people always say it's easier to peel ginger with a spoon, but I find it just makes a big mess with tiny shreds of skin everywhere, so I'm a fan of using a normal peeler. It works for me, but you do whatever you need to do. So I'm going to set these aside while I make the porridge over on the stovetop. I have a small pot here where I'll add a couple of tablespoons of glutinous rice flour. Mak Kimchi says you can substitute with all-purpose flour if you can't find this. Then a cup of water, and now I'll turn it on medium-high heat and watch it until it just starts to bubble, giving it a little stir every so often. Once it starts to bubble, I'll add in a tablespoon of sugar. Keep stirring at this point so nothing sticks. It should take about 2 to 3 minutes to reach this semi-translucent appearance that sticks to the back of a spoon, kind of like a gravy would. Now I'll move this off the heat and let it cool down completely before moving on. So here's a look at the cabbage at the end of the 2 hours brining. It's given up a lot of liquid and wilted down by about half the volume. I'm taking this over to the sink to wash and rinse off as much of the salt as I can and squeezing out as much liquid as possible. And the porridge has cooled down, so I can blend it into a paste with all of the flavor bombs. I'm using my small food chopper here, but you can use a larger one or another pureeing device that you might have. The cooled porridge goes in, along with some fish sauce and the onion, garlic, and ginger that I chopped up earlier. I was thinking of adding some salted shrimp at this point, but I decided against it because I think it's salty enough already. Zip it up until it's a fine puree, then pour it into a large mixing bowl. This is the same one I rinsed out after washing the cabbage. Now I'm adding a healthy dose of gochu-garu, which is Korean red pepper flakes. You can adjust up or down as you like once you make this a couple times. And now's a good time for gloves. I don't mind the smell of garlic on my hands, but things do get messy from here on. Stir it all together and then add in the radish and scallions. And finally, the cabbage. You really have to get in there with your hands so you can work the paste into all the nooks and crannies. I think this part is really fun. I love playing with my food. You can eat some right now as a fresh kimchi, but it will be much tastier after it ferments. Here's a small kimchi box I picked up at my Asian market. It has an airtight outer lid and also this inner lid that will keep the kimchi submerged as it ferments. It also has a hole to vent air as needed. If you don't have something like this, a glass jar or other airtight container would work just fine. So I'm jamming the kimchi as tightly as possible in an even layer, trying not to create any air pockets. Then the inner lid goes in and I'm pushing out all the air. Mangchi says 1 to 2 days at room temperature or 2 weeks in the fridge to ferment. This time I'm going to go with the refrigeration method on this batch. 2 weeks later and here it is. Smells really good. I can't wait to try it. Look at the color and the extra juice that's come out. It's absolutely delicious. And this will continue to ferment with more time in the fridge. I'm leaving this batch in the kimchi box, but you could transfer it to a glass jar if you prefer. Then you could start a new batch while you're eating from the jar. I'm keeping this little bit for my meal today and the rest goes back into the fridge. The flavors will continue to improve over time, and one of my favorite things is to use the last, most sour bits to make a kimchi jjigae. So satisfying. For my meal today, I'm having it along with a couple other banchan to go with this kalguksu from Bibigo. I've never been disappointed with any Bibigo products, not sponsored by the way, and this soup was no exception. Awesomely delicious. Enough about the Mak Kimchi. Let's move on to the Kkakdugi, which is a fermented cubed radish kimchi. This recipe is from the Asian Pickles book. We'll need another large bowl at the ready. So I need 2 pounds of this Korean radish, so I'll cut a piece and weigh it. Need a little more. Oh, not enough. There we go, just right. So this is 2 pounds. And now I'm going to cut these down into about 1/2 inch cubes. Not looking for perfect cubes, just trying to be consistent throughout. I am starting all of these here on the same afternoon, so the kitchen might get a little chaotic with all the different bowls and gadgets. For example, at this point, the cabbage for the kimchi was brining on the back counter. This is going to sit in a simple salt and sugar brine for 30 minutes with a toss halfway. Notice how there's no extra liquid in the bowl at this point? So this will sit on my back counter while I prep the remaining ingredients. Not very many. This recipe is actually very simple. Just a little ginger and garlic that I'm mincing as finely as I can. They'll hang out in this little bowl. And now it's been 30 minutes and you can see all of this water that's come out from the radish. I'm going to drain the liquid away, but not rinsing the radish. I want to keep the salt and sugar that's clinging to the cubes. All drained, the radish goes back into the bowl, along with the ginger, garlic, gochu-garu, and fish sauce. Karen's technique is to ferment this at room temperature for 1 to 3 days, checking and stirring every 24 hours. First, I'm loosely covering this bowl with plastic, pushing the plastic onto the cubes, but leaving it loose around the edges so that the air can still get in and out. I also covered it with a kitchen towel to keep critters and debris out without cutting off airflow. Karen says to put it in a cool, dark place and check it until it reaches the pleasant fermentation that pleases you. I kept mine in my cool oven since I wasn't planning on using it during that time. So here I am checking after the first 24 hours. Notice the extra liquid? That's more yummy juice. Okay, let's try. Nope, not ready yet. In fact, I barely noticed any change at all. So give it a stir, cover, and let it go for another day. Here's 48 hours. Still more liquid. Ooh, it's smelling and tasting better today. Depending on your preference, this might be ready, but I'm gonna let it go for another day. I want a really funky and sour taste. See you tomorrow, my lovelies. 72 hours. Ah, can you smell that? That's Funky Town. There it is. That's the flavor I'm looking for. So I have a quart jar, which should be enough, but just in case, I prepped this little 8-ounce jar for any overflow. Spoon? Hands? Remember, I love playing with my food. Karen says this will keep in the fridge at least 2 weeks, and I can vouch that since I recorded this over a month ago, the last cup in my jar is still just fine and has gotten even funkier, in a good way. Serve it up as a side for just about anything. Today I had it with homemade sundubu jjigae and white rice. Sundubu was one of the first things I remember eating in Korea so many years ago, and it still hits me whenever I make it. And here's another bibigo item I'm trying for the first time. Found it on a BOGO sale. Again, not sponsored. Yum, I could eat Korean food every day. But moving on, this is another recipe from Asian Pickles. It's a popular Vietnamese pickled daikon and carrots, and it's the quickest and simplest one to make, and I do make it pretty regularly. For this one, I need 12 ounces of daikon. Use Japanese daikon if you have it, but this Korean radish is also a variety of daikon. Maybe just a little bit stronger in radish flavor, but either one will work just fine in this recipe. I also need 8 ounces of carrots. Time to try out a couple of my little kitchen gadgets. This is a small julienne peeler. It's good for small jobs, but not good enough if I want to julienne all of this. Not sponsored, but here's a recent purchase that I've found very useful for large batches. You can see it's already stained from carrots I used in another recipe. It comes with a ton of blades for different purposes. This one is the fine slicer blade, which I think does a better job at julienning than the julienne one, or at least if you want to keep the slices long, which I do in this recipe. Do pay close attention not to cut yourself, and use the handguard when you get close or it feels slippery. And I love this collection tray that just pulls out easily. I decided to cut the carrots into 3-inch pieces to see if they fit better, and yeah, it did make it much easier. The goal is to create thin matchsticks or fine juliennes about 3 inches in length. Of course, you can do this using any other tools at your disposal, even just a good sharp knife. I was just looking for an excuse to play with my new toy. Same treatment for the daikon. We want about 3-inch long juliennes or matchsticks. I went a little heavy on the carrots here today, but you can adjust the ratio of carrots to daikon however you like. I think my favorite is going about 2/3 daikon and then 1/3 carrots. And now I'm just picking through a little here and there and separating some that are still attached to each other. This is kind of fun too, playing with my food. Oh, and now I have some carrot bits to snack on while I work. So now just toss it with a teaspoon of salt and let it sit for 30 minutes with a toss at the halfway point. When 30 minutes was up, I made a brine of room temperature water, distilled white vinegar, and sugar. Then just stir it up to dissolve the sugar. Now we have to drain and squeeze out the extra liquid from the veggies. No rinsing again because I want to keep some of the salt. Now I'm putting it into a container, glass or plastic, doesn't really matter in this application. And then pour the brine over the top, pressing the veggies down so they're fully submerged. These will be ready for eating after an hour in the fridge, but they are much better the next day after everything marries up. I like to eat this pretty much any time, just by itself, straight from the fridge. or anywhere else that a lightly sweet and sour pickle would belong. The most common use that most people are familiar with is on Vietnamese banh mi sandwiches. I love these sourdough baguettes that I find at Publix, and I just pull out some of the inside to make room for all the ingredients. A good smear of sriracha mayo, and then I start piling in with the fillings. I'm using marinated and grilled chicken thighs that I made yesterday for the protein, but I do also have a video showing how I make pork meatball banh mi in my air fryer. I'll link that video below. Also, as always, ingredients and instructions will be in the description box below if you want to make any of these at home. This was a fun video to make. I was already considering doing some of these when my friend Jim at Jim's Kitchen said he wanted to do a pickle playlist collab. So I had a compelling reason to get to work on it. Thanks, Jim! And thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to like, share, subscribe, and ring the bell so you get notifications for new videos. Leave a comment if that's something you're into. Thanks again, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye!